Alright, so let's expand on our movement a little bit by first adding sprinting. So first thing we want to do is expand this map a little bit. It's a little too small to be able to sprint around. So I'm going to hold down Alt and drag the floor. It creates a new one, duplicates it. Also, if you hold down Shift while moving something, the camera moves with it. It's a good little tip. I'm going to change this to unlit real quick so we can see outside. And just pull this right next to the original floor. Cool. And I'll pull this wall out and hold down Alt and duplicate these as well. And same with the ceiling. Okay, that all looks good. We can bring some lights over there. Alright, and if you want, you can go ahead and build the lighting again. Alright, now that that's all done, let's go into our blueprints folder right here. And I want to make a new folder. We're going to call this blueprint components, because we're going to be making this a blueprint component, and or an actor component, I should say. And an actor component is something we can make that we can attach to different actors. In this sense, we'll be attaching them to characters specifically. So let's go ahead and create it. So right click, blueprint class, and actor component right here. And we'll just call it BPC for blueprint component underscore movement, because this will handle our sprinting and our crouching in the future. So I'm going to open that up. I'm going to close our light flicker stuff. Save. So I'm going to use the event tick real quick to kind of show you how this works. So off the tick, I'm going to print a string, and we're just going to call this or let's call it BPC movement is active. Compile and save. And if we go ahead and hit play, we won't see anything in our tick because this component is not attached to anything. So let's open our L1 character, and here, where add component, we can now search for BPC movement, and it goes down here under character movement. Compile and save, and now that it's attached to our character, which spawns into the world, BPC movement is now active. Great, so let's remove that string. So let's create a function. This will be the initialize function. And we can give it an input of character. And we can just call it character as well. And we can promote this to a variable, and we'll call it player ref. Compile and save. We're doing it with this function like this so we can avoid casting. And while casting isn't necessarily a bad thing, it is a little expensive on our computer. So when there are workarounds, we definitely want to use those workarounds. So I'll show you how. So in our L1 character, because we've added BPC movement to our character, in our event graph, or in our L1 character initialize function, we're going to pull this down, and we're going to make a sequence, and we're going to pull these widgets to the then one. So this will happen second. First, we can get our BPC movement, and we will call the initialize function from BPC movement. And there's our character input that we added right there. And we just can get a reference to self and plug it in. This way we don't have to worry about casting. Compile and save. So back in BPC movement, we can go to the event graph, and let's create some variables. First, I'm going to just close all these, which are just the inherited variables that we have right here. We can turn them off if we want. I'm just going to leave mine on. Oops. But let's create a new variable, and this will be called sprint speed, and it'll be of type float. And we also want to make sure it's editable, so we can easily change it in our L1 character. So here on BPC movement, we can just click on it, and we can adjust the sprint speed right here. Took me a second to find it. So back to BPC movement. I'm gonna default it to 800. That'll be our sprint speed for now. Let's also create our walk speed. Let's go ahead and make that editable as well. And we're going to use this variable to set our walk speed at the beginning. So if you remember, in the beginning, if we click on L1 character movement, we changed our max walk speed to 400. So it's a little slower than the default, which is 600. So let's set our default walk speed here also to 400. And what we're going to do is in this initialize function, off the player ref, or we can just drag in a reference right there, we can get character movement. That should be at the bottom. And we can set max walk speed to the walk speed. So now, in the very beginning, when we start our game, our walk speed will be updated from whatever it is in our BPC movement. So if we change it here to like something crazy like 1200, we hit play, we now walk at a speed of 1200, which is super fast, but I was just making it that fast to demonstrate. So we can change this back to 400. So we need 3 more variables after this. It'll be our max stamina, our current stamina, and our minimum stamina. Just do min stamina. Our max stamina, we're going to make it editable, and we're going to make the default 100. It's editable, so you can easily change what you want. You can make the min stamina editable as well, but in most cases, I just realized I adjusted the min stamina and not the max. So let's change the min back to 0 and the max to 100. But like I was saying, you could also make the min editable if you want, but in most cases the min will stay as 0 and will not be updated or adjusted, but it's up to you. So we can compile and save. I'm going to keep mine off. Current stamina we can actually make private because we don't need to reference this variable in any other blueprints. So let's go into our event graph, and we can delete these 2 for now. We're going to make a custom event called start sprint. Now we only want to be able to start sprinting if our max stamina, or no, not max stamina, our current stamina is greater than our min stamina. So first we just want to check, do we actually have stamina? Let's do an if. And if we do, then let's grab our player ref, get character movement, and set max walk speed to our sprint speed. If we want, we can select these 3 right here, right click and collapse to function, and we could just call this set player max walk speed. So we can reuse it, open it up, and take this max walk speed and drag it onto here to create an input. Compile and save. Back in the event graph, we now have a function, and it'll be a little easier to reuse. So after we set the speed to sprinting, we want to call a timer. So we'll set timer by function name. And this timer, what it'll be doing, it'll just be depleting our stamina and then checking to make sure we haven't hit 0. So the function name, we don't have the function yet. So let's create it by right-clicking, creating a custom event, and we'll call this sprint timer. Now back in the set timer, we'll type in also sprint timer. You have to make sure that this name right here is spelled exactly the same as the custom event here, or it will not work. So let's set the time of the timer to 0.1, and we want to make sure we've checked looping. Now the time here, this is the amount of time that passes before this function is called again. So this way, this function is called every 0.1 seconds, or 10 times a second. Now in here, we can actually prove it by just doing print string and say timer was called. And let's make it something we can tell more, so let's change this to 1 second. Compile and save. And an L1 character for a debug here over here. Let's hit C, and it creates a comment. We'll call this debug, so we know that everything under this comment is just for debugging purposes, so we can remember to delete it later. We can do input 1. So if we hit the 1 key, get our BPC movement, and we will call start sprint. Compile and save. And remember, start sprint starts the timer. So if we hit 1, nothing happens. And this is because our current stamina is set to 0, and it is not above our min stamina. So this is currently going out the false node, which nothing continues. So let's set our current stamina to, let's say 100, which is our max stamina. Try again, hit play, and we hit 1, and every 1 second the timer is called. Now it looks like those two are just being static there, but that's because the print string stays for exactly 2 seconds. So every time one is removed, it's at the exact same time another one is added. So maybe 1 second wasn't the best time to use because it made it look like it stopped, but it didn't. So let's change this back to 0.1. And we can delete the print string, compile and save. Let's also delete our debug. And in sprint timer, we want to subtract the 1 from the current stamina every time. So let's get current stamina, and we want to subtract 1, so float minus float 1, and then we want to set the current stamina to that amount. But instead of just plugging that into that, we want to get a clamp which doesn't allow it to go above a max value or below a min. So we plug the return to there. The min value will be our min stamina, and the max will be our max stamina. So it can never go above currently what is 100, and it never go below 0. Compile and save. So what we have at the moment is every 0.1 seconds after we start sprinting, it subtracts 1 from our current stamina. So it subtracts 10 a second. Now we want to check if it hits our min stamina. So let's create a branch, and we want to ask if the current stamina is less than or equal to our min stamina. Now it never technically should be less than because we clamped it, so it should always just clamp to 0, but it is just feels like a safer way to do it since it's always going down. And if you put exactly equals, I'm just the type of person to get paranoid that it's going to be, go down to like negative 0.0001, and it will not work. So I just like to do less than or equals to min stamina, and we'll put it in there. And if that's true, we want to call our third custom event, which we can make now, and we want to call it stop sprint. And off the true, stop sprint. Now the first thing we want to do in stop sprint is stop this timer. We don't want to continue to deplete stamina. So we can do this with a clear timer by function name, and once again, type in sprint timer and make sure it's spelled the exact same as these. So that'll stop the timer. After that, we want to set player max walk speed to our walk speed. So back to a walk. And this is actually in a place where we can test it at the moment. So right before we test it, I want to be able to see what our stamina is. So let's, right in here, create a print string and plug our stamina into that. Compile and save. So let's go into edit project settings and down to input. And once again, we're adding another one, and we'll call this sprint, and this will be bound to our left shift. close that. And now in L1 character, our input sprint, we should probably start moving this horizontally rather than just vertically. We'll put it here. Input sprint. On pressed, we want to get our BPC movement and we want to call start sprint. So let's test it out. Let's press play. And we can walk around like normal, everything's the same. And we press the shift and we speed up. And you can see our stamina is depleting on the left. And it's going down, we're moving very fast. And once it reaches 0, we go back to our walk speed. We've gone back down to 400. Great. So this all works as intended. As you can see before, we also were not able to start sprinting again once we ran out because our stamina was 0. But that was demonstrated in the beginning, but I can demonstrate again right here. We've gone back to our 400 walking speed, and hitting sprint does nothing. So let's make it, if we release the sprint button, we stop sprinting. This is as easy as going into L1 character, and off the released, just calling stop sprint. Compile and save. So now, if we press play, we hold down shift, and we stop. Our stamina is now at 78, and we're back at our 400, and we start again, and it starts from 78, now it's at 55. Stopped running, and so on and so forth. Before we make the function to regenerate stamina, there's a couple issues. One is if you hold sprint while standing, our stamina still goes down. So if I hit play, and if I don't move with WASD, and I just hold sprint, our stamina depletes. We don't want that because we're not actually moving. So in BPC movement, we want to add a AND Boolean for this first branch here. Let's pull this off, type in AND. So it has to check if both this and this are true, for it to go off the true path, of course. And for the second, we have to get our player ref and get velocity and get the vector length of that velocity, and we just have to ask if it's greater than 0. So basically what the player ref's velocity vector length is returning is the actual speed we're going. So if we set the max speed to our sprint speed, which is 800, and we accelerate all the way at our full speed, this will output 800. If we stand still, this will be 0 and everything in between as we accelerate. So we just have to put this more than 0 to make sure we're actually moving. And once again, for safety measure, I like to put it just like something like 10. So we have to have had accelerated above 10, which, you know, happens in the fraction of a second. So if we hold shift now, it does not go down unless we are moving. And now it does. Now the second issue we have is if we hit play, and we start moving, and we hold down shift, and we stop moving, but we continue to hold down shift, our stamina continues to deplete. So we need to fix this as well. So we basically have to ask the same question for our sprint timer. Actually make sure we're still moving. So up here, let's drag this all down just a bit. And we can pull all this off to the right. And we want to ask if, and we can just copy and paste this right here. And plug it in. And off the false, we want to call stop sprint. So we can test that out again. And I move, I hold down sprint. I stop moving while still holding down sprint, but my stamina no longer depletes. Now lastly, we just want our stamina to be able to regenerate after we've stand still. So what we want to do is after setting this walk speed, we want to set a retriggerable delay for 5 seconds. So it waits 5 seconds before it starts regenerating, so it doesn't start going up immediately. And we want to first check, or let's get a branch. Started typing in just what I was saying. And we want to get a is timer active by function name. And function name, like always, is sprint timer. So we have to check if sprint timer is active. And this is because when we stop walking, or stop sprinting, I'm sorry, and it sets it back to walk speed, and then it starts to wait 5 seconds, and then it'll start to regenerate. But if you start sprinting again, within this 5 seconds, it will still start to regenerate 5 seconds later, even if you're sprinting. So you could be sprinting and your stamina could be going up instead of down. So we just want to check if the sprint timer is active, and if it's true, we won't do anything because we don't want to start regenerating our stamina. But if it's false, we want to set timer by not event, function name, and this will be a new function, our fourth, and this will be called I do that all the time. I type in what I'm going to call the custom event. We're going to type in custom event, create one, and we're going to call it regenerate stamina. And that's what we want to type in for function name. Make sure it's spelled the exact same. I'm going to double check real quick. Yep, looks good. And for the time, I want this to regenerate faster than we lose it. So I'm going to put 0.03. And we want to check looping. Now in regenerate stamina, we're basically doing the opposite thing we're doing in sprint timer. So we want to get our current stamina, and we want to add one, and then we want to set our current stamina to that amount. But once again, we want to clamp it. Nope, not clamp angle. We want to clamp float. And the min is our min stamina. Max is max stamina. And then we don't want to just have this constantly running, even when we're full, so we just have to check if the current stamina is greater than or equal to the max stamina. Once again, it's the same thing. You could just use if current stamina is equal to max stamina, but to be safe, I'm using greater than or equal to. If this is true, we want to clear timer by function name, and we're clearing our own timer, so regenerate stamina. And make sure it's spelled the exact same. Okay, looks good. Before we can test it out, we also want to copy this, Command C, and we want to clear this timer on the start sprint. So after all this if, right before we set our sprint speed, we want to clear this timer. So if we start sprinting when our stamina is regenerating, it'll immediately stop regenerating the stamina, and it'll start our sprint timer, which depletes it. So now we should be able to test it out and see how it looks. So we still have our print string for our stamina, and we walk around normally and nothing happens, and we start sprinting and it starts going down. Let's have it go all the way down first to 0. Because we added a few things, so we have to test them all out. And after 5 seconds, it should start to regenerate. So 2, 1, now. Oh, we don't have a print string for regenerating, of course, so we can't see it regenerate. Let's just add it right here. My apologies for that. So for regenerating, we also want to print the current stamina. All right, let's run it all down again, back to 0. And once it hits 0, after 5 seconds, it should start regenerating it again. So 4, 3, 2, 1, And now it's regenerating much, much faster than it depletes. Cool. And we can sprint and start it over. Now if we sprint and stop about halfway through, 4, 3, 2, 1, it starts regenerating from that number back to 100. Now if we start sprinting and then stop, 4, 3, 2, but then start again, you see it does not start regenerating even though that 5 seconds has passed. And that's it. And the greatest part about it is how easy it is to tweak these variables. So we just go into L1 character, click on BBC movement, and we have all of these. So we can change the sprint speed, the walk speed, and the stamina amounts. I'll leave the staminas to 100 and 0. I like to work with those values. And if I want to make it, you would probably only want to adjust these if you had some kind of upgrades where you could gain more stamina throughout the game. But if you want to adjust the speed of the losing stamina and regenerating stamina, I would adjust these time values in the 2 set timers, which you could easily make variables just by right-clicking promoting to variable and then adjusting in here. It's up to you. One thing I will say though is make sure your stamina doesn't run out too fast. It's another common mistake in indie games. Many games will have characters with stamina that runs out almost immediately, which can be very annoying, especially because it doesn't feel like it would make sense in a horror game where you would probably have lots of adrenaline rushing through you. But also, in some games, you obviously wouldn't want to give them like infinite stamina. But it all depends on your game. You can also adjust the speeds as you wish. I feel like both of these are a little too fast for a horror feel. So I'm going to bump the sprint down to 500 and the walk down to about 250 and see how that looks for me. So now the walk feels pretty slow, pretty creepy. And the run feels fine in comparison. Now I feel like we aren't some kind of crazy speedster. This feels a lot better to me, so I'm going to keep it like that. Alright, that'll be it for this episode.